The town of Kettering, a sleepy, quiet place nestled between the dense forest and overgrown hills, was a world unto itself, a place where everyone knew everyone else, and secrets were like whispers in the wind. It was a place where nothing much ever seemed to happen, where families held on to traditions and routines, and where life moved at a pace that felt both comforting and safe. But in the shadows of its cobblestone streets and white picket fences, a darker story was unfolding, one that would soon unravel the very fabric of this serene community. Margaret Winthrope was a name spoken with reverence in Kettering. A widow for over a decade, she had stepped into the role of matriarch with quiet grace after the untimely death of her beloved husband, Thomas, a preacher who had devoted his life to the service of the community. His tragic death in a mysterious fire at the family church had left Margaret devastated, but she appeared to find solace in the church's work, in the quiet life she now led. What set Margaret apart, however, was her devotion to the young women in Kettering. With a calm demeanor and unwavering faith, she had become the town's savior for lost girls, those who had wandered too far down troubled paths, those who had fought with their families, or fallen victim to drugs, alcohol, and desperation. The story was always the same: a broken girl, a heart in need of healing, and Margaret Winthrope's promise to save them. Parents who had once given up on their daughters found themselves putting their trust in Margaret. "She will help them," they would say, with that unshakable conviction in their voices. And without fail, the girls would come back changed. The withdrawn teenager, pale and defeated, returned smiling, with a new glow to her face, holding onto the words of Scripture like a lifeline. The once troubled addict, desperate for a new life, now had hope, a purpose, and a newfound faith. They had been saved. But there was something about Margaret that didn't sit right with everyone. There were murmurs of unease, whispers shared between concerned neighbors and restless parents. They couldn't quite put their finger on it, but there was a lingering feeling, like a shadow in the corner of their vision, that all was not as it seemed with the widow. Then, 3 girls disappeared. Isabel Williams, Natalie Moore, and Kyla Johnson, 3 young women who had once been rescued by Margaret herself, vanished without a trace. No warning, no signs. They simply disappeared. Each one had been sent to their parents to seek permission before leaving the safety of Margaret's home, but they never came back. The town, accustomed to the slow and steady rhythm of life, didn't know what to think. Parents assumed they'd gone off to find themselves, as Margaret had said. After all, the girls were happy now. They had been changed, saved. They were beyond the need for her guidance. But when William Harper, a father whose own daughter, Stephanie, had been among Margaret's first rescues, began to ask questions, he was met with silence. Margaret assured him that Isabel, Natalie, and Kyla had simply decided to leave, each one ready to face the world on her own terms. Something in William's gut told him this wasn't right. He had seen how Margaret's influence over his own daughter had grown, how Stephanie had become a mere shadow of herself after spending time in Margaret's care. And now, the 3 missing girls, his daughter's closest friends, were nowhere to be found. William's fear turned to suspicion, and soon, his search for the truth would lead him into the darkest corner of Kettering, the one hidden behind Margaret's serene mask of piety and grace. Margaret's world, a world where girls came to be saved, was not what it appeared. What lay behind her eyes was a power more sinister, more dangerous, than anyone could have imagined. And for those girls, Isabel, Natalie, Kyla, and Stephanie, escaping Margaret's shadow would prove to be a fight for their very lives. In Kettering, nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after Isabel, Natalie, and Kyla disappeared, the town of Kettering tried to carry on as usual. The sun rose lazily over the tree-lined streets, casting long shadows over the quiet homes. People went about their business, unaware that something far darker had begun to stir beneath the surface of their idyllic community. William Harper couldn't stop thinking about the girls. His mind wouldn't let go of the unsettling feeling that had taken root ever since he'd learned they were gone. It was too quiet, too calm. How could 3 girls, 3 of Margaret's success stories, simply vanish like that? No goodbyes, no explanations. No one had seen them leave. What troubled him more was how Margaret had dismissed their disappearance. "They've gone off to seek their peace," she had told him in that soft, soothing voice. But even as she said it, there was something in her eyes, something flickering just beneath the surface. A coldness? A trace of something else? William had tried to ignore it. After all, Margaret had helped Stephanie. She had saved Stephanie. But his unease continued to gnaw at him. Isabel Williams had always been one of the more rebellious girls in town. A fiery spirit, quick to argue and even quicker to run from responsibility, she had spiraled into addiction at an early age. But after her time with Margaret, Isabel had returned home cleaner, calmer, and seemingly with a new sense of purpose. Her once strained relationship with her parents was now filled with warmth. Isabel had even started volunteering at the local shelter, a place she had once ransacked for her next fix. Natalie Moore, the shyest of the three, had fallen into a world of drugs and depression after the death of her older brother. She had been adrift, lost in a haze of self-doubt and sorrow. Margaret had taken her in, offering her a place of refuge. Under Margaret's care, Natalie became more confident, her quiet nature now replaced with a soft yet determined resolve. Natalie had begun to speak openly about her dreams, about going back to school, about having a future she had once thought was beyond her reach. Kyla Johnson, the most withdrawn of the group, had been a runaway, abused and lost, with nowhere to go but the streets. She found solace in Margaret's home, a place where she could finally rest and heal. Kyla had found strength in Margaret's teachings and had begun to embrace a newfound faith. Her transformation was the most dramatic of the three, an almost complete metamorphosis from a broken soul to someone who seemed at peace, whole. But now, all three of them had vanished without a trace, and William couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. Margaret had told their families that the girls asked for permission to leave, to return to the outside world. They had found themselves, she claimed, and were now ready to face the world with the strength Margaret had nurtured in them. But William wasn't convinced. They hadn't just left, they had disappeared. That afternoon, he drove past Margaret's house on his way to the store. The curtains were drawn, and the house sat in eerie stillness. He couldn't help but feel like the place was watching him, waiting for him to make a move. He had always respected Margaret, but now, there was a dark, unsettling presence surrounding her home, something that hadn't been there before. He stopped his truck in front of the driveway. Without thinking, he got out and made his way up the front steps, the wood creaking under his weight. As he reached the door, he hesitated for just a moment. Should he knock? Should he go in? Before he could decide, the door swung open. Margaret stood in the doorway, her face as serene as ever, a welcoming smile on her lips. "William," she greeted him, her voice like velvet. "I wasn't expecting you today. What brings you by?" He stared at her for a moment, trying to read her expression. But it was flawless, unreadable. Her eyes were too calm, too composed. Too perfect. "I've been thinking about the girls, Margaret," he said, his voice a little too rough. I don't understand. Why did they leave without telling anyone? No goodbyes? No word?" Margaret's smile faltered just slightly, just enough for William to catch it. Then she straightened, her calm demeanor slipping back into place. "They are at peace now, William," she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. "They're free. I did what I could for them. But sometimes, we must let them go, as difficult as it is." Her words seemed rehearsed, practiced. A chill crept up William's spine. He forced himself to step over the threshold, but as he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was holding its breath. He had never felt more like an intruder. Margaret led him into the sitting room. The air inside was thick, almost suffocating, the scent of incense too strong. The room looked untouched, as if it had frozen in time. A single candle flickered on the coffee table, casting long shadows across the walls. "Have you heard from Isabel's family?" William asked, his voice low. "Or Natalie's?" Margaret paused, her fingers brushing the edge of the candle's flame. For a split second, William thought he saw a flicker of something darker in her eyes. "They are fine, William. Trust me," she replied, her voice a little too sweet. "They just needed some space to find their own way. I assured their families that all was well." Something about her reassurance didn't sit right. William felt his heart race. Why was she so sure? Just as he was about to speak again, the doorbell rang. Margaret's smile widened. "Excuse me," she said, turning to open the door. William's instincts screamed for him to leave, but he stayed rooted to the spot. As Margaret disappeared into the hallway, William glanced around the room. The faint sound of footsteps echoed from the second floor, the movement soft, deliberate. Suddenly, a girl appeared at the top of the stairs. It was Stephanie. William's breath caught. She stood there, staring down at him with wide eyes, her face expressionless. Her hair, once wild and untamed, was neatly brushed, and she wore a simple dress that looked oddly out of place. "Stephanie?" William called softly, stepping toward the base of the stairs. His voice shook. Stephanie didn't move. Before William could take another step, Margaret returned, standing beside Stephanie with a hand on her shoulder. "Ah, William," she said, her voice warm, like a mother introducing her child to a guest. "This is Stephanie. She's come to help me with something today. A small task." Stephanie's eyes never left William's. She seemed distant. It was as if she didn't recognize him. A strange, unsettling feeling washed over William. "What do you mean by that? What task?" Margaret's smile never wavered, but there was something else now, a flicker of something more calculating beneath the surface. "Don't worry, William," she said softly as she led Stephanie back toward the stairs. "You'll understand soon enough. All in good time." William watched them disappear upstairs, his mind racing. As the house seemed to settle into silence, he was left with a feeling of dread. Something was happening here, something far darker than he could have ever imagined. And then, just as quickly, it struck him. The girls weren't the only ones disappearing. Margaret was taking something from him, too. Was she changing Stephanie? The question hung in the air like a threat, and William had a sinking feeling that his daughter would be next. As the sound of footsteps faded upstairs, William turned toward the window, his gaze drawn to the darkening horizon. He could have sworn he saw movement in the trees just outside Margaret's house. Someone, or something, was watching. But when he looked again, the trees were still. What he didn't know was that the answers he sought were already much closer than he realized. And they were waiting. William Harper couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The town of Kettering, with its sleepy streets and picturesque homes, seemed almost too perfect. The tranquility that hung in the air now felt like a lie. The unsettling disappearance of Isabel, Natalie, and Kyla, along with the strange behavior of his daughter Stephanie, had left him spinning in a whirlwind of unanswered questions. He had seen the changes in Stephanie. The girl who once fought him at every turn, who had been lost in a world of rebellion, was now docile, obedient, and eerily serene. But it wasn't just Stephanie. Isabel had been vibrant, her spirit once unbreakable, but now, she was gone. Not physically, but spiritually. Her family hadn't heard a word from her, and there were no traces of her leaving Margaret's house. And then there was Natalie. William had known Natalie's parents since childhood, and her sudden transformation after spending time with Margaret left him questioning everything he thought he knew. But now, the three girls had vanished, just like that, without a trace, without a word, sent away on the supposed request of their families. Or so Margaret claimed. He needed answers. And the only place to get them was the one place he'd been trying to avoid, Margaret's home. A sudden movement upstairs caught his attention. It was soft at first, footsteps, light and deliberate. William turned his head, his instincts kicking in. He stood up, almost without thinking, and moved toward the stairs. A sudden movement upstairs caught his attention. It was soft at first, footsteps, light and deliberate. William turned his head, his instincts kicking in. He stood up, almost without thinking, and moved toward the stairs. William turned, his heart leaping in his chest. Who else was here? He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone, even though he knew Margaret and Stephanie were the only ones in the house. Or were they? Just then, the sound of a door creaking open echoed from the back of the house. William turned sharply, but when he looked toward the hallway, the house was eerily silent. Except for the faint sound of soft breathing, too close, too close. Something was waiting, something far darker than he had imagined. and he was about to find out what. Would William discover what was happening to the girls before it was too late? Or would he fall into the same trap as the others? The answer was just a step away, but would he take it? William Harper's thoughts were in chaos. He stood frozen in the center of Margaret's living room, heart hammering in his chest. The strange sounds from upstairs echoed in his mind, the whisper that had sliced through the silence, and the heavy, suffocating atmosphere that seemed to grip his every breath. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching him, waiting. Margaret had taken Stephanie upstairs, and for a moment, William stood there, unsure of what to do. The uncertainty gripped him. Should he follow them? Confront Margaret? He couldn't risk going upstairs alone. Not after everything he'd seen. The girl he knew as Stephanie was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. He needed answers, before it was too late. He had always believed in the goodness of people. But Margaret, she wasn't what she seemed. What had she done to Stephanie? To Isabel? To Natalie? His mind raced back to the moment he first set foot in this house. He hadn't been alone in his suspicions. Other parents, though too scared to speak up, must have noticed the same oddities. They had let their guard down, trusted Margaret with their daughters. And now 3 girls were gone, without a trace. He wasn't going to make the same mistake. He couldn't. William turned toward the door, his body moving instinctively. He needed to find a way to break free of Margaret's control. To get the truth about what was happening in this house. As he reached for the doorknob, he froze. Something wasn't right. The air felt colder. The room seemed to press in on him. The whisper had been softer this time, but it was there. No longer from upstairs. It came from the corner of the room. He turned slowly, but saw nothing. The tension in the room thickened, and that sense of unease intensified, like an invisible hand was tightening around his throat. A sharp knock at the door shattered the silence, and William jumped. His heart was in his throat. Who could it be now? He had half expected Margaret to walk back into the room, but instead, the sound of footsteps came from behind the door. He couldn't leave. Not yet. Margaret had been too calm, too in control. He couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something here, something hidden beneath the facade of piety and charity. This house was not a sanctuary. It was a prison. Before he could make a decision, the door opened, and a familiar face emerged from the shadows. It was Stephanie again. But not the Stephanie he remembered. She stepped into the doorway, her eyes glazed, and her expression lifeless. "Stephanie," William whispered, his voice trembling. "What's going on? Where are Isabel and Natalie? Why won't anyone tell me the truth?" She didn't respond immediately, standing in the doorway like a ghost. Her gaze was blank, devoid of the spark of recognition that had once been so familiar. And then, in a voice so soft it could have been mistaken for a dream, Stephanie spoke. "They're here. All of them are here." The words didn't register at first. William blinked, stepping forward. "What do you mean, Stephanie? Who's here?" But Stephanie didn't answer. Her eyes shifted toward the dark hallway behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. It felt like time had stopped. There was something wrong, something very wrong. Her eyes, once filled with confusion and rebellion, were now empty and distant. She was no longer his daughter, and he was beginning to understand that she may never have been the same girl he once knew. Margaret had reshaped her into something else. "You've seen too much already, William," Margaret said softly, her voice low and dangerous, as if the house itself held its breath. "But you're not ready for the truth yet. You haven't even begun to understand what I've done." William's body tensed. His thoughts raced, but the words wouldn't come. His stomach churned as he looked at Stephanie, his own daughter, trapped in this place, caught in Margaret's web. "You've changed her," William whispered, his voice thick with disbelief. "You've done this to her, to all of them." Margaret's smile only deepened, her eyes flickering with something dark and ancient. "Not just them, William. But you too are part of this. This is what you wanted, wasn't it? You thought you could save them. But now you see, they've chosen this path." The word, chosen, echoed through William's mind. They hadn't chosen this. They were victims, drawn into Margaret's manipulative grasp, just as Stephanie had been. And now he realized they were all connected to something larger, something he didn't fully understand yet. Margaret stepped forward, her every movement graceful, controlled. "You want to know the truth, don't you?" she asked, her voice a melodic whisper. "You think this is about saving them. But it was never about salvation, William. It was about control. And now you are just like them. A prisoner of my creation." The walls seemed to close in around him. He could feel the weight of the house pressing down on him, the air thick with something suffocating. His mind reeled. He had to get out. He had to find a way to break free of this nightmare. Just as he turned to leave, he heard Stephanie's voice again, soft and hollow. "You can't leave, Daddy. You've already chosen your path." William froze, his back to the door. What did she mean? His mind raced as he turned to face Margaret, who stood just behind Stephanie, her presence looming like a specter. "What have you done to her?" he asked, his voice shaking. Margaret didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached out, placing a cold hand on Stephanie's shoulder, her fingers long and slender like a predator's claws. The moment their skin touched, Stephanie seemed to go still, her expression vacant. William's heart skipped a beat as he realized that it wasn't just Stephanie that had changed. It was the very fabric of her being, twisted and reshaped by Margaret's hands. The other girls, Isabel, Natalie, Kyla, they were all part of this horrifying transformation. Margaret's voice, low and almost tender, broke the silence. "Don't you see, William? They are mine. All of them. Just as you are now." Before William could respond, the sound of soft footsteps echoed from the hallway behind him. He spun around. The door to the basement creaked open, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Isabel. Her eyes, wide and blank, met his. She was different, her face pale, her movements stiff and unnatural. The girl he had once known was no longer there. "Isabel?" William whispered, stepping toward her. "What's happening? Please, talk to me." But Isabel didn't answer. She simply stared at him, her lips curling into a ghostly smile that sent a shiver down his spine. She walked past him, her footsteps slow, as if in a trance. William's blood ran cold. They were all lost. All of them. And now it seemed he was too. As the darkness closed in, William's world shattered around him. What had Margaret done to his daughter? To Isabel? To all of them? The answers were within reach, but would he find them in time? If you're as shaken as William, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever felt like you were drawn into a story, knowing the truth was too dangerous to uncover? And if you're enjoying the twists and turns of the story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for the next chilling chapter. The truth is waiting. Will you dare to face it? William's mind raced as Isabel's eerie smile lingered in his thoughts. The girl who had once been full of fire, whose spirit had burned with a need to break free from the world's expectations, was now a hollow shell of herself. And it wasn't just her. It was all of them. Kyla, Natalie, Stephanie, and even Isabel, each one of them lost in the same cold, lifeless trance. But William wasn't going to let this go. He couldn't. There was still a part of him that refused to believe what his eyes were telling him. He needed to see it, to understand it. He had to know the truth, no matter the cost. Turning back to Margaret, he finally asked the question that had been gnawing at him. "What did you do to them? What is this? You've turned them into all this." Margaret's lips parted in a slow, deliberate smile. "Oh, William. You still don't understand, do you?" Her voice was almost a purr now, soothing yet chilling, as if each word were crafted to lull him into submission. "This isn't about turning them into something else. This is about freeing them. You see, all these girls, Kyla, Natalie, Stephanie, even Isabel, they were lost. Broken. Like you. Like the world wanted them to be. I saved them. I gave them the truth they were seeking. I gave them peace." William shook his head, his chest tightening. The more she spoke, the more his skin crawled. "Peace," he whispered. "This isn't peace. This is—" Margaret stepped forward, her presence swallowing the space between them. "It's the only peace worth having, William. You think they were happy before? You think they were truly free? They were shackled by their own desires, their own weaknesses. I offered them a way out. A way to transcend all of that. To rise above it. And now they're mine. William's pulse quickened as Margaret's words sank in. They're mine. Just as he opened his mouth to demand answers, the front door slammed open with a violent crash. William spun around. His heart stopped. Standing in the doorway was someone he hadn't expected to see, someone he thought he'd left behind. It was Kyla. Her eyes, wide and blank, met his. She was different, her face pale, her movements stiff and unnatural. She walked slowly toward William, her gaze never wavering from his. Her lips were barely moving when she spoke. "Help me," Kyla gasped, stumbling into the room. Her voice was thin, barely a whisper, but it cut through the air with a sense of desperation. "You have to get out. She can't control you the way she controls me. You have to leave. Now." William's world shifted again, as if the floor beneath him had suddenly disappeared. Was this Kyla breaking free from Margaret's hold? Or was it just another lie, another manipulation? Could he save her? Could he save them all? If you're feeling as unsettled as William, don't stay in the dark. Let us know your thoughts. What do you think is really happening in Margaret's house? Leave a comment below, and tell us where you think the story is headed. William's heart pounded in his chest as Kyla stumbled into the room. Her skin was pale, her body rigid, but there was something about the way she moved, something desperate in her eyes that made William's blood run cold. She had broken free. But for how long? "She can't control you the way she controls me. You have to leave. Now," Kyla whispered, her voice trembling. It was a plea for help, a faint echo of the girl she once was. But even as she spoke, William could see the resignation in her eyes. There was no hope in her gaze. Only fear. Margaret's smile, which had been so serene just moments ago, twisted into something darker, almost predatory. She stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "You misunderstand, Kyla. He doesn't have to leave. He's already part of this, just like you." William stood frozen, his thoughts crashing into each other. She controls them all. They're all hers now. But Kyla, she was trying to fight back. She was fighting. And that was the sliver of hope he needed. "No," Margaret continued, her voice gaining strength. "You see, William, they were always meant to come to me. They just needed guidance, a way out of their broken lives. And now they understand. They're mine. They've always been mine." William's chest tightened. It was as if the walls were closing in around him, pressing him deeper into the house, into Margaret's grasp. She was so calm, so sure of herself. But he could see it now. He wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was being drawn into her world, whether he liked it or not. "What are you doing to them?" William's voice cracked, barely above a whisper, as he struggled to keep his composure. "What have you done?" Margaret's smile never wavered. She reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Kyla's face with gentle fingers, the touch too affectionate for someone who claimed to save them. "They were lost," Margaret said, her voice a caress, "but now they're free. And soon you will be too. It's all so clear now, William. You'll see it for yourself." But William wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on Kyla, and a wave of determination surged through him. No more. He wouldn't let this go. He couldn't. Not while they were still trapped. "Kyla, please," he said, his voice softer now, imploring. "Fight it. You have to fight her. You're stronger than this." For a moment, Kyla's gaze seemed to flicker. There was a tiny spark of recognition, a hint of the girl he once knew. Her lips parted as if she were about to speak, to say something that could change everything. But before she could, Margaret's hand shot out, gripping Kyla's wrist with unnatural strength. "No," Margaret's voice was firm, cold. "She doesn't belong to you anymore." And just like that, Kyla's expression hardened once more, her eyes clouding over, the faint glimmer of hope gone. The house seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for William to make his next move. And then came a sound from behind him, something soft, but undeniably chilling. The creaking of a door. William's eyes darted toward the hallway, dread creeping into his bones. The door to the basement had opened. Someone was coming. But who? William stood frozen, watching Isabel slowly approach him. Her movements were mechanical, as if she were tethered to something invisible. Her face was blank, her eyes vacant, a far cry from the vibrant girl he had known. She was a shell, a shadow of the person she had been, and it was all Margaret's doing. His heart clenched as he watched her, his daughter's closest friend, his daughter's sister in all but blood, stand before him, unrecognizable. He had come here to rescue them, to bring them back. But now, the reality of the situation was staring him in the face. They were lost. And it was Margaret's influence that had consumed them, turning them into puppets. "Isabel," he said softly, his voice hoarse. "Please, you have to remember. This isn't you. I know you're still in there." But Isabel didn't react. She didn't even blink. Margaret, standing a few feet behind her, watched the interaction with a twisted satisfaction. "You don't understand, William," she said calmly, her voice low and soothing. "She is herself now. She's free. They all are." William's chest tightened. Free? This wasn't freedom. This was a prison of the mind, of the soul. These girls, his daughter, her friends, had been stolen from him. And now Margaret was playing God with their lives. "Free!" William spat, his voice rising in anger. "You've taken everything from them. You've twisted their minds and forced them into this cult of yours." Margaret's smile didn't falter. "You're wrong, William. You just don't see it yet. They were broken, lost, just like you. You've always seen them as fragile, as needing to be fixed. But I gave them the truth, the clarity they were seeking. They are finally whole. They finally understand." William's anger flared, but underneath it, a cold, gnawing fear began to seep into his bones. He was standing in the lion's den now, and he was realizing that every step he'd taken toward the truth had only led him deeper into Margaret's control. He could see it in Isabel's eyes, her emptiness, her lack of recognition. The light that had once sparkled there was gone. And it wasn't just her. It was Kyla, Natalie, Stephanie. They were all lost to him, consumed by Margaret's influence. His own daughter could be next. Could he get her back? Could he save them all before it was too late? "Please," he said, his voice cracking. "I won't give up on you, Isabel. I won't let her take you." But as he spoke, Isabel's lips parted again, and for a moment, William thought he saw a glimmer of the old Isabel, the girl who had once been full of life and fire. But it was fleeting, almost imperceptible. "I'm not the girl you knew anymore," she said softly, the words coming from her like an echo, devoid of emotion. "I'm free, William. You can't save me. You can't save any of us." Before William could respond, a shadow passed over the doorway. His heart stopped. It was Natalie. She appeared in the doorway, her face as hollow as the others, her steps slow, almost deliberate. Her eyes locked onto his, but there was no recognition, no sign that she knew him. "Natalie," William breathed, stepping forward. But Natalie didn't move. She just stood there, silent, staring at him with those empty eyes. "Don't you see, William?" Margaret's voice was calm, almost maternal. "They are at peace now. This is what they wanted. It's what they've all been searching for. They're free from the world's pain, free from the struggle. They're mine now, and they will never leave me." William took a step back, his hands trembling. Was he too late? Had he lost them forever? Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Stephanie standing at the bottom of the stairs, her expression blank, her hands by her sides. She wasn't moving, but the way she stood there, like a sentinel, a part of Margaret's twisted army, sent a chill through his spine. As Natalie and Stephanie slowly advanced toward him, William felt the walls of the house closing in, the weight of Margaret's influence pressing down on him. Was there a way to break her hold? Was there still hope for his daughter and the others, or had Margaret already claimed them all? William's mind raced, the air around him growing colder by the second. As he watched Kyla, Isabel, Natalie, and Stephanie, he felt like he was standing at the edge of a precipice, gazing into a void. These girls, his daughter's best friends, were no longer who they once were. They were different, hollow. And he was beginning to understand that the darkness inside Margaret's house had consumed them all. He had come here to find answers, to rescue them from whatever twisted control Margaret held over them. But now, he wasn't sure if he could even trust what his eyes were telling him. Were they truly gone, lost to this strange power, or was there something else happening, something more sinister? As he stood there, struggling to make sense of what was happening, a faint sound broke through the silence, an almost imperceptible sound that made his blood run cold. A soft humming, almost like a lullaby, drifting from the basement. It was haunting, eerily familiar, and yet it made William's skin crawl. A part of him wanted to run. Another part, the part that was still fighting to save these girls, told him he needed to go deeper. What was in that basement? What was Margaret hiding? He wasn't alone in the house anymore. He felt it. Something was watching him from the shadows, waiting. And just as quickly as the thought crossed his mind, he heard it again, the faintest echo of whispers, too distant to fully understand but close enough to feel the chill creep down his spine. Was it just his mind playing tricks on him, or was something else lurking in the depths of Margaret's house? A place where the girls had been twisted, reshaped into something unrecognizable? If you think you know what's really happening in the widow's shadow, leave your theories in the comments below. What do you think Margaret is hiding? Is there something darker in the basement? And if you're feeling the chills like William, don't forget to like and subscribe. The soft humming from the basement grew louder, tugging at William's nerves like a sinister melody he couldn't ignore. The house felt different now, its walls closing in, the air thick with the promise of something terrible lurking just below the surface. Margaret had already shown him the depth of her control over the girls, Stephanie, Isabel, Natalie, and Kyla, but he refused to accept that they were lost forever. He couldn't. Not while there was still a chance to break the hold Margaret had over them. He turned toward the basement door, every instinct telling him to turn away. But he couldn't stop himself. He had to know what was waiting in the darkness, had to face whatever horrors Margaret had hidden from him. As he stepped toward the basement, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. He spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just the silence, thick and suffocating, stretching out before him. Then, from the shadows, Stephanie appeared. She stepped from the corner of the hallway, her movements fluid and unnervingly calm. But this time, there was something different about her. Her eyes were clearer than before, sharper, like she was finally seeing the truth. "Don't go down there, Daddy," Stephanie whispered, her voice a strange mix of warning and sorrow. "It's too late for us. It's too late for all of us." William's chest tightened. "No, Stephanie," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I won't leave you in this place. You're still here. I can see it in your eyes. We can fix this. We can fix everything." Stephanie didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, her expression softening, the glimmer of recognition in her eyes almost breaking William's heart. But then she took a step back, her body stiffening. "You can't fix it," she said quietly. "We've already chosen. Margaret's truth is the only one we need now. You should leave. Before it's too late." William opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, Margaret's voice echoed through the house, cool and commanding. "Enough, Stephanie." Margaret's figure emerged from the shadows, her presence overwhelming. She stood at the top of the basement stairs, her eyes cold, calculating. Her gaze swept over William, and for a brief moment, he felt like a pawn in a game he couldn't control. "You see, William," Margaret said, her voice steady and low, "this is where you belong." Margaret stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her, and a smile curled at the edges of her lips. "You've always been lost, haven't you? Just like them. You thought you could save them. You thought you could save your daughter. But this is what they needed. This is what they wanted." William's heart sank as the weight of her words hit him. Was this truly the end? Could he save them, or was he too late? The tension in the room was unbearable. The walls seemed to close in as Margaret's twisted grip tightened. Was there any way out? Or had William been drawn too far into Margaret's dark world? What do you think will happen next? Can William still break Margaret's control over his daughter and the others? Or is it already too late for all of them? Leave your theories and thoughts in the comments below. And if you're still hooked, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. The final truth is waiting in the shadows, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Margaret's words echoed in the silence, a chilling realization settling over William. He could feel the truth slipping through his fingers, but a flicker of hope burned within him. He couldn't give up on his daughter, on these girls. Even if Margaret's influence was deep, even if it seemed hopeless, he had to try. With a final surge of determination, he stepped toward the basement door, his heart pounding with both fear and hope. This wasn't the end. He wouldn't let it be. He could still fight. They could still be saved. But as he reached for the doorknob, the lights flickered, and the house seemed to groan in protest. Margaret's laughter filled the air, dark and hollow, as if she knew William's every move. The basement door creaked open with an eerie groan, as if the house itself was warning him. Margaret's voice echoed down the stairs, soft and sinister, like the promise of something worse waiting below. "You're too late, William." Her words hung in the air, suffocating him with the weight of inevitability. But still, he stepped forward, unable to stop himself. The faint hum he had heard earlier grew louder, vibrating in his chest like a living thing. He wasn't sure what he expected to find down there, but he knew that whatever it was the key to everything. William descended into the basement, his footsteps echoing in the narrow, claustrophobic space. The hum was louder now, but there was something else. Whispers, indistinct voices, all blending together in a symphony of madness. He shivered, the air growing colder with every step. The walls of the basement seemed to close in on him, the darkness swallowing him whole. And then he saw it. A figure stood at the far end of the room, illuminated only by a faint, flickering light. Stephanie. But she wasn't the girl he had known. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and vacant, staring into the void. She was standing in front of a large, old mirror, her hands outstretched as if reaching for something just beyond her grasp. "Stephanie," William called, his voice breaking through the heavy silence. Her head snapped to the side, her eyes locking onto his for a brief moment. Then she smiled, a smile that didn't belong to her. A smile that belonged to Margaret. "It's already done, William." The basement was colder than anything William had ever felt. It wasn't just the chill of the air, it was as if the darkness itself had a weight to it, pressing in on him from all sides. As he stepped deeper into the basement, the faint flickering light cast twisted shadows across the stone walls, distorting the space into something unrecognizable. He could hear Stephanie's soft breathing, almost like she was in a trance, lost to the world around her. And yet, there was a glimmer of hope. That brief moment when their eyes had met, before the smile took over her face, William thought he saw a flicker of recognition. A cry for help buried beneath Margaret's influence. "Stephanie," William's voice trembled, his heart pounding in his chest. He stepped closer to her, careful not to make any sudden movements. The air around him grew heavier, charged with an electricity that made his skin crawl. The closer he got to her, the more he could feel the weight of Margaret's presence, even though she wasn't physically in the room. "Stephanie, please," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have to fight this. You're not lost. You can still come back to me." But Stephanie didn't respond. She continued staring at the mirror, her hands still outstretched, as if reaching for something just out of her grasp. William couldn't see what she was looking at. The reflection in the mirror was hazy, distorted, as if the glass itself was hiding the truth. Suddenly, the mirror seemed to shimmer, its surface rippling like water disturbed by an unseen hand. William stopped in his tracks, his heart racing. What was happening? The reflection in the mirror began to change, morphing into something grotesque, something far darker than he had ever imagined. The faint flickering light from above cast twisted shadows that seemed to stretch and crawl, coiling around Stephanie's figure. For a brief moment, William saw flashes of something, visions of the girls, Isabel, Kyla, and Natalie, their faces warped and distorted, their eyes empty, as if they were trapped inside the mirror, looking back at him with silent screams. And then he saw it. Margaret's face, pale, her lips curled in a smile that was both sweet and sinister, appeared behind Stephanie in the mirror. "This is where you belong, William," Margaret's voice echoed in the basement, though she wasn't physically there. "You've come this far, and now it's time to embrace the truth. You can't save them. They are mine." As the mirror seemed to distort further, Stephanie's expression shifted. Her smile, once unnatural, deepened into something terrifying. Her hands reached further toward the glass, as if it were pulling her in. William's heart raced. Was she trying to escape, or was she surrendering to Margaret's power? "Stephanie!" William cried out, his voice breaking through the growing hum in the room. "Stephanie, fight it!" But before he could move, the mirror rippled once again, this time with more force. The glass seemed to swallow the light, plunging the basement into an unnatural darkness. The temperature dropped even further, and the whisper of 1,000 voices filled the air. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. The whispers swirled around him, getting louder, closer, until they seemed to close in on him like a suffocating fog. And then, just as quickly, the air went still. The mirror's surface rippled one last time before it became still. The basement was unnaturally silent, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. William stood frozen, his chest tight with fear and confusion. The whispers had stopped, but something even more unsettling filled the room, an eerie stillness, as if the house itself were waiting for something to happen. Stephanie was still standing before the mirror, her hands outstretched, her gaze empty. William's heart ached at the sight. His daughter was in there, somewhere, trapped beneath Margaret's control. He refused to believe she was gone for good. There had to be a way to break through. But how? Margaret's voice, sweet and seductive, broke through the silence like a knife. "You're running out of time, William. She's already mine." The words cut through him like a physical blow. His mind raced as he turned back to face Margaret, whose face was now staring back at him from the mirror. It was a reflection of the woman he had once seen as a pillar of strength, but now, it was a twisted image, darkened by the power she had over these girls, over him. "You think you can still save them?" Margaret's voice echoed in his mind, the sinister undertone making his blood run cold. "They don't need saving, William. They're free. They are where they belong." William clenched his fists, trying to steady his breath. He couldn't let her win. He couldn't let her take them all, not without a fight. "You're wrong," William said through gritted teeth, his voice shaking but filled with determination. "They're not free. They're lost. And I'll bring them back." Before Margaret could respond, the ground beneath him shook violently. The basement seemed to scream with a power that wasn't natural. The lights above flickered, casting harsh shadows across the stone walls. The air turned frigid, as if the very temperature of the room was changing, plunging him into an unnatural cold. Stephanie let out a soft gasp, her fingers twitching, her hands pulling back from the mirror as if something invisible was pulling her away. The reflection of Margaret in the glass began to distort, her image warping like melting wax. Then, just as William reached out toward Stephanie, the mirror cracked. A sharp, deafening sound filled the room as the glass shattered into pieces, falling to the floor with a shattering crash. But the moment the mirror broke, the world around them shifted. The basement seemed to shift with it, the walls closing in, the shadows thickening. Something was happening, and William wasn't sure if it was the end or the beginning. What will happen now that the mirror has broken? Is this the moment of William's salvation, or is it too late? Will he be able to break Margaret's hold over Stephanie and the others, or has he walked straight into her trap? The truth is unraveling, but the cost may be higher than he ever imagined. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think Margaret's true plan is? And what happens when the mirror shatters? The mirror is broken, but the real battle is just beginning. Will William be able to fight for Stephanie and the others before Margaret's hold on them is irreversible? Or is he already too late to save anyone? The answer is waiting, just beyond the shattered glass. The basement was plunged into darkness. The sudden crash of the mirror shattering echoed in William's ears, its sharp sound still ringing in the air, mingling with the haunting silence that followed. For a moment he couldn't move, he could barely breathe. The air was thick with tension, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to tremble. He had broken the mirror, but in doing so, had he broken something more? Was it too late to stop Margaret? He couldn't afford to hesitate. Not now. William's heart raced as the room seemed to close in on him. The flickering lights above him cast erratic shadows, And the whispering voices from before, the ones that had tormented him in the basement, were returning, only louder now. The voices weren't just whispers anymore. They were chants, murmured in unison, like a dark incantation. Come closer, come closer. The temperature dropped. He could see his breath in front of him, cold and unnatural. Stephanie flinched, her hands shaking as she recoiled from the broken mirror, but her eyes, those hollow, lifeless eyes, didn't leave his. She was still there. He could still reach her. Stephanie! William called, his voice breaking through the haze of darkness. Stephanie, please, you can hear me. She blinked slowly, her head tilting ever so slightly. But the response didn't come right away. Instead, she spoke in a voice that was not her own, distant and detached, almost as if the words were coming from somewhere far beyond her body. You can't save me, Daddy. You can't save any of us. Her words sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't just Stephanie speaking anymore. It was the voice of Margaret, that cold, controlled voice that had manipulated every word, every action, every girl that had crossed her path. The floor beneath William's feet cracked with a deafening crunch, and the basement walls seemed to shift, as though the very foundation of the house was coming alive. A deep rumbling filled the space, vibrating in his bones. Margaret's presence was suffocating, pressing down on him from all sides. Before he could react, the lights flickered once more, this time long enough for him to see something that made his heart stop. From the broken mirror, dark tendrils of shadows snaked out, moving like living things, crawling across the floor toward Stephanie. She stood completely still, her hands clenched at her sides, the shadows wrapping around her, merging with her very form. Stephanie! William shouted, rushing forward to grab her, but the shadows seemed to reach for him too, pulling at his legs, holding him back. The cold was unbearable now, a freezing weight pressing down on him, trying to drag him to his knees. And then the final blow. A figure stepped into the room from the shadows, the last thing William expected to see. It was Margaret. Her eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating light. Her smile was twisted, triumphant. She had won. It's over, William. Margaret's voice echoed through the room, the darkness surrounding her as she moved toward him, her presence suffocating. They're mine now. They were always meant to be mine. The room seemed to pulse with Margaret's dark energy, the shadows thickening around them like a living creature, coiling and twisting, pulling at William's limbs. The oppressive weight of it threatened to suffocate him. The cold was unbearable now, seeping into his bones, but he refused to let it stop him. His heart pounded in his chest as he took a step forward, determined to reach Stephanie, determined to break the hold Margaret had on her. He had to. He couldn't leave her like this, couldn't let Margaret win. Margaret's laugh echoed through the basement, soft and sinister. You're still so naive, William, she said, her voice dripping with superiority. You think you can save them? After everything I've done for them? After everything I've shown them? They're mine. And they'll never leave. William clenched his fists, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. He could feel the shadows tugging at his body, trying to pull him deeper into the darkness. The more he struggled, the tighter they gripped him. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't give up on Stephanie. Stephanie stood motionless before the mirror, her eyes glazed as if in a trance, but William could still see the faint flicker of something inside her, something that wasn't completely gone. He had to get to her. He had to reach her. Stephanie! William cried out once more, his voice raw with emotion. Please, fight it. You don't have to stay with her. You're still you, Stephanie. I know it. Fight, please fight. For a moment, nothing happened. The shadows seemed to close in tighter, pulling at him, trying to drag him into the dark. But then, Stephanie's eyes twitched. Her head turned slightly toward him. For the briefest of moments, a flicker of recognition passed across her face. And then, just like that, it was gone. The flicker of hope he had seen vanished, replaced by a look of utter emptiness. Stephanie's body stiffened, her gaze hardening, and before William could react, she stepped forward into the shadows, her hands still outstretched. No. Stephanie, William whispered, his voice cracking. But she didn't respond. She just kept walking deeper into the dark. Behind him, Margaret's voice echoed with satisfaction. "She's gone, William. You should have known better." The basement walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing thicker. A terrifying realization dawned on William. Was he too late? Before he could reach out for her, the sound of something moving in the shadows caught his attention. A low, soft sound that sent a chill through his entire body. Another figure emerged from the darkness. It was Natalie, standing just beyond the reach of the shadows. Her eyes were vacant, just like Stephanie's. Her body was rigid, as though she were being controlled from the inside out. William took a step back, his heart pounding. He had to stop this. He had to save them. But Margaret's cold laugh filled the room, louder now, echoing through the basement. "You're too late, William. They're mine and now you're mine too." William is trapped, his daughter slipping further away with every second. Is there still a way to break the hold Margaret has on Stephanie, Natalie, and the others? Or has Margaret's power already consumed them all? What will happen next? Can William still turn things around, or is he doomed to fail like all the others? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think William can break Margaret's hold, or will he fall like the rest? And don't forget to like and subscribe. The truth is about to come to light, but will anyone survive it? As the shadows of the basement grew thicker and the temperature dropped even further, William's heart raced. He had lost Stephanie, the one person he was fighting for. Natalie, Kyla, and Isabel were no longer the girls he had known. They had slipped beyond his reach, each of them drawn deeper into Margaret's dark web. Margaret's cold laugh echoed through the room, and the oppressive darkness pressed closer. William could feel his strength slipping, his hope fading. But as the shadows reached for him, something unexpected happened. A faint light flickered at the edge of the room, cutting through the suffocating darkness. It was weak at first, a mere glimmer, but it grew stronger. And then, a figure stepped from the shadows, someone William had not expected. An elderly woman, draped in a heavy shawl, her long gray hair falling in waves around her face, appeared before him. Her presence was calm, yet commanding, as though the very air had shifted to make room for her. There was an ethereal quality to her, as if she didn't entirely belong to this world. "You're too late, William," Margaret's voice snapped, venom in her words, but she seemed to shrink back slightly, her eyes flicking toward the new arrival. The old woman stood still, her deep brown eyes piercing through the shadows with a clarity that seemed to cut through the thick air. She exuded an aura of wisdom, something ancient, timeless. "You are not too late, William," the woman said in a low, melodic voice, as if she had been watching for far longer than William could comprehend. "But you must listen. There is still a way to save them." William blinked, his heart racing even faster as the old woman approached. How did she know his name? Who was she? He had never seen her before, yet there was something unsettlingly familiar about her presence. The woman extended her hand toward him, her fingers curling slightly. The shadows seemed to pause, the oppressive force around him loosening just enough to allow him to breathe. "My name is Eliza Crow, and I've been watching," the woman said, her voice filled with gravity. "I've seen the darkness that has taken root in this house, and I've been waiting for the right moment to intervene." Margaret hissed, stepping backward, her face twisting with sudden fury. "You should have stayed away, Eliza. You've meddled enough." But Eliza's eyes didn't leave Margaret. "You are the one who meddles, Margaret. You've taken what doesn't belong to you, and now you must face the consequences." The air around them shifted again. This time, it was as if the very foundation of the house was shaking. The shadows that had been pressing in on William suddenly recoiled, as if something in the room had tipped the balance. A bright, soft light filled the space around Eliza, and the temperature seemed to rise with it. The shadows shrank back, their grip loosening on William's body. Margaret's smile faltered for the first time. "You think you can stop me, old woman?" she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can undo what I've done?" Eliza stood her ground, her expression unyielding. "The balance has shifted, Margaret. You can't control everything forever. The truth is coming and you can't stop it." Suddenly, with a force that shook the very air, Eliza raised her hand, and the light around her blazed brighter than ever before, pushing back the shadows. But as the light intensified, something shifted in the room. The ground beneath them cracked, the ceiling groaning as though the house itself were resisting her power. The room crackled with tension. Eliza's presence had shifted the atmosphere in a way William couldn't fully comprehend. The shadows that had once seemed to suffocate him were now retreating, the coldness lifting as though something ancient had awakened. Margaret, who had been so sure of her power, now stood momentarily frozen, her face twisted with disbelief and rage. "You cannot undo what I've done," Margaret hissed, her voice sharp with venom, as if the very air itself resented her words. "I've taken them, William. They're mine. All of them." Eliza's gaze never left Margaret, her eyes calm and focused, like someone who had seen far darker things and understood their true nature. "No, Margaret," Eliza said, her voice ringing clear and powerful. "You've only stolen what isn't yours and you've twisted it. But the truth always finds its way. You can't hold them forever." William stood between them, caught in the growing battle. His eyes flicked between Eliza and Margaret, the weight of the situation pressing on him. Stephanie was still standing by the broken mirror, her gaze distant, her body rigid. The other girls, Isabel, Natalie, and Kyla, were just as lost in the haze of Margaret's power. "Please, Eliza," William said, his voice shaking. "You have to help them." "I can't." Eliza raised her hand, silencing him with a single motion. "You're not alone, William. You've been fighting for them. But now, it's time for you to stand back and trust the truth. Margaret's control is powerful, but it's not unbreakable." William stepped back, his heart pounding. Was this it? Was the truth finally breaking through? Eliza's hand glowed with a soft, warm light that pulsed in the air around them. She began chanting in a low, melodic tone, the words unfamiliar to William but filled with an ancient power. The air around them hummed, vibrating with energy, and the shadows that had once plagued the room started to recede further into the corners, as if they were being forced back by an unseen force. As Eliza chanted, Stephanie's body stiffened. Her hands, still held at her sides, twitched slightly as if something deep within her was awakening. For a brief moment, her eyes flickered with the faintest hint of recognition. "Stephanie," William whispered, his voice hoarse with hope. "You're still there. I know you are." The moment he spoke, Stephanie's eyes snapped open fully. But this time, the look in them was different. There was no emptiness, no vacancy. She was awake. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. She blinked rapidly as if trying to clear the fog from her mind. "What happened?" But before William could answer, a sharp cry rang out from across the room. Kyla was struggling, her body writhing as the shadows around her began to fight back against Eliza's light. Her body jerked violently, her hands clutching at the air as if she were being pulled into the depths. "No!" William shouted, his heart racing. "Kyla, fight it!" Margaret stepped forward, a malicious grin spreading across her face as she raised her hand, commanding the shadows to press tighter around Kyla. "You see, William? You're too late. They're all mine." But just as the shadows closed in on Kyla, Eliza's voice rang out in a clear, commanding tone. "Not anymore, Margaret." With a powerful wave of her hand, Eliza sent a wave of blinding light through the room. The shadows recoiled, screeching as if in pain, and Kyla collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, free from the clutches of darkness. But Margaret wasn't finished. "This isn't over, Eliza," Margaret sneered, her face twisted in fury. "You think you can just undo what I've done? You think you can stop me?" The battle was far from over. Stephanie was waking up, but Kyla, Isabel, and Natalie were still lost in the shadows. Can Eliza's power truly break Margaret's control over them, or has Margaret's dark influence already done too much damage? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Can Eliza stop Margaret, or will Margaret's hold on the girls be too strong? And if you're hooked on the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. The final confrontation is upon us, and the truth is just beginning to unfold. You won't want to miss the final chapter. The basement trembled under the weight of the confrontation. Margaret's shadows writhed and hissed, retreating only reluctantly from Eliza's powerful light. William stood frozen, every muscle tense, his chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. His eyes darted from Stephanie, finally blinking, finally aware, to the other girls, who were still caught in the haze of Margaret's influence. Eliza's voice rang out, commanding and melodic, the chant steady and unwavering. The energy in the room thickened, pushing the darkness back inch by inch. William could feel it pulling at him, tugging at his resolve, testing him. "You must focus, William," Eliza said, her eyes locking onto his. "They're reaching for you. You are their anchor. If you falter, they fall." William's gaze fell on Kyla, who was writhing as if fighting an invisible grip. "Kyla," he shouted, running toward her. "You're stronger than this. Remember who you are." For a moment, she stiffened, and William thought he saw her mouth move as if forming words, but it was only a twitch. The shadows around her tightened, and a soft, menacing whisper echoed through the basement, filling his ears. "They belong to me," Margaret's voice hissed from every corner, cold and omnipresent. "You cannot stop me." William's stomach churned, but he couldn't let fear take over. He reached out, touching Kyla's trembling hand. "It's me, Kyla. You know me. Fight it." Suddenly, a faint glow appeared around her wrist, growing stronger with every second. Eliza's light seemed to channel through him, connecting him to the girls, guiding them back. Kyla's eyes flickered with recognition, the blank emptiness giving way to the spark of the girl she had once been. William's heart leapt, hope sparking for the first time. If he could reach her, he could reach the others. Across the room, Isabel and Natalie began to stir. Their hands clutched at their heads as if breaking free from an invisible cage. William could see their bodies trembling, but their eyes, once blank, were beginning to focus. "Stephanie!" William called, turning to his daughter. "Hold on to me. We can do this. Together." Stephanie stepped forward, reaching for William's hand. The warmth of her touch sent a shiver of relief through him. She was back. The girl he knew was back. Margaret's face contorted with fury, her voice cutting through the basement like a knife. "No. This isn't happening. You cannot undo what I've done." The shadows lashed out in a final attempt to pull the girls back into darkness. But Eliza raised both hands, and a wave of radiant energy erupted from her, pushing the shadows back violently. The basement shook violently, dust falling from the ceiling, the mirror shards scattered across the floor like glittering teeth of some monstrous jaw. For a split second, everything froze. The girls were free, or at least close. William could feel it. But Margaret's voice, sharp and threatening, came again, closer now, as if she were standing right behind him. "You cannot escape me, William. This house, these girls, they will always belong to me." William spun around, fists clenched, ready to face Margaret. But in the corner, a shadow moved. Something even darker than before, something that had been hiding, waiting. Margaret stepped forward, her presence dominating the room. Her eyes gleamed with fury and triumph. "You think you can undo this, William? You think you can take them back?" Her voice carried over the chaos, chilling and precise. "They were always mine. They always will be." William's chest tightened. He looked at the girls, Stephanie's fingers gripping his arm, Kyla's hand clutching her chest, Isabel and Natalie wobbling on unsteady legs. His determination hardened. "No, they're not yours. You can't control them anymore." Eliza stepped beside him, her hands glowing with a soft, unyielding light. "William is right, Margaret. Your time is over." Her voice rang with authority that seemed to push back the shadows, forcing them to recoil like smoke in the wind. Margaret laughed, a sound that made William shiver. She raised her hands, and the shadows surged forward, a living mass, writhing and twisting. But William, standing firm with Eliza beside him, felt a new strength coursing through him. He reached out to Stephanie. "Hold my hand. Together we're stronger." Stephanie's grip tightened around his, and as she did, the other girls instinctively followed suit. One by one, they reached out to each other, forming a line of solidarity. The light from Eliza pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeat, and the shadows writhed, screeching, retreating inch by inch. Margaret's eyes widened. No. This isn't possible. The shadows twisted violently, but the united light from William, Eliza, and the girls forced them back. With a final, deafening roar, William and Eliza channeled all their energy into the center of the basement. The shadows shrieked and convulsed before exploding outward like smoke caught in a violent wind. Margaret screamed, a piercing sound that echoed off the walls as her control shattered. The girls stumbled but regained their footing. Stephanie's eyes, once vacant, were now fully awake, filled with recognition and fear, but also relief. Kyla's body shook as she breathed deeply, breaking the grip of the darkness. Isabel and Natalie looked around, confusion and newfound awareness flashing across their faces. Margaret, now weakened, fell to her knees, the shadows around her dissipating entirely. Her voice was a whisper almost lost. "This isn't over." Eliza stepped forward, her aura bright and commanding. "It is over, Margaret. You will harm no one else." William took a step toward the girls, his arms outstretched. "You're safe now. All of you. We're getting out." The basement was quiet, the shadows gone. The girls clung to William as he guided them toward the stairs. Stephanie looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered. Margaret's house, once a place of terror, now felt hollow, almost empty. The darkness had been expelled, but the memories of what had happened remained. William and the girls emerged into the sunlight outside, blinking at the brightness, feeling the weight of freedom pressing upon them. Eliza followed behind, her expression calm but weary. "They'll need time to heal, William," she said softly. "But the worst is behind them. They are free." William nodded, holding Stephanie tightly, glancing at the other girls. "We'll get through this. Together." The four girls, once trapped in Margaret's twisted influence, were finally safe. The shadows had been defeated, but the memory of the widow's shadow would never leave them completely. They had survived. They had escaped. And the darkness that had haunted them for so long was finally behind them. What do you think happened to Margaret after the shadows were destroyed? Could she rise again, or was this truly the end? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've been captivated by Vanished in the Shadows, The Dark Truth of Kettering, don't forget to like and subscribe. The story may be over, for now, but the darkness always leaves a trace, and the truth is never as simple as it seems. The girls were safe. William had survived. Eliza had intervened. But the memory of the widow's shadow would linger forever, a chilling reminder that darkness can hide in the most trusted places, and that courage, love, and unity are the only light strong enough to break it.